The pregnancy test sat on the marble bathroom counter like a loaded gun. 2 pink lines. Clear. Undeniable. Damning. Stacy Peters stared at it with trembling hands, her reflection in the gold-framed mirror showing exactly what she was. A nobody in a stained waitress uniform, dirt smudged across her jaw from 16 hours of serving people who didn't see her. Her cheap sneakers squeaked against the pristine tile floor of the Palazzo Grande Hotel's executive bathroom, a bathroom that cost more per square foot than her entire apartment. She shouldn't have been there. Employees weren't allowed on the 15th floor, but the nausea had hit her so hard during the lunch rush that she'd barely made it past the service elevator before her stomach revolted. And now she knew why. 3 weeks ago, she'd made the stupidest decision of her life. One night, one reckless, desperate choice when Antonio Ramirez, the man whose name made hardened criminals cross themselves, had looked at her like she mattered, like she was worth something more than coffee stains and tips counted in quarters. Now she was pregnant with a mafia king's baby, and she was about to lose everything. The bathroom door clicked shut behind her. Stacy's blood turned to ice. She whirled around to find Antonio Ramirez blocking the only exit, his 6'3" frame filling the doorway like a beautiful nightmare. His bespoke charcoal suit probably cost more than she made in a year, perfectly tailored over shoulders built for violence. Black tattoos snaked up his neck from beneath his crisp white collar, a crowned skull visible just above his tie, serpents coiling around his throat like promises of death. His dark eyes dropped to the test on the counter, then to her flat stomach, then back to her face with predatory focus. "Show me." His voice was velvet wrapped around steel, the kind of voice that didn't ask twice. Stacy's throat closed. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but stand there while her world collapsed around her. "I said, show me, Stacy." He took one measured step into the bathroom, and she caught the glint of gunmetal at his hip beneath the suit jacket. "Or I'll come get it myself." Before we continue, I'll like to know where you are watching from and what time it is over there. And do not forget to like and subscribe for more videos. Now, let's get started. 14 hours earlier, Stacy's alarm had screamed at 4:30 in the morning, dragging her from the 3 hours of sleep she'd managed to steal. Her studio apartment was freezing, the landlord still hadn't fixed the heating, and winter was coming fast. She'd stumbled through her morning routine in the dark to save on electricity, pulling on her gray waitress uniform that smelled like grease no matter how many times she washed it. The Palazzo Grande Hotel had been her salvation and her prison for 2 years. The pay was barely minimum wage, but the tips could be decent if she smiled pretty enough, laughed at bad jokes, and pretended the exhaustion wasn't eating her alive from the inside. Double shifts were hell, but they were the only way to keep her head above water. She'd clocked in at 5:15 for the breakfast prep, her manager already barking orders about a private event on the 15th floor. Some exclusive business meeting, extra security, high-profile guests. Code 4, don't screw this up or you're fired. By 10 o'clock, her feet were screaming. By noon, she'd refilled coffee cups for what felt like the 1,000th time. Her face frozen in the practiced smile that made her tips. The kitchen girls whispered about the men on 15 dangerous men with expensive watches and dead eyes, cartel bosses, crime lords, the kind of people who made problems disappear. Her phone had been buzzing all morning. Frank. Again. She'd ignored the first 5 calls. By the 6th, she ducked into the service hallway and answered with her jaw clenched. "What, Frank? Where's my money?" Her stepfather's voice was slurred, thick with day drinking and rage. "You were supposed to bring it 2 days ago. Do you have any idea what these people do when you don't pay?" "I don't have it." Stacy kept her voice low, checking over her shoulder to make sure no one heard. "I told you, I'm broke. I gave you everything I had last week. That wasn't enough." Something crashed in the background, probably another beer bottle against the wall of the filthy house she'd escaped 3 years ago. "The Koreans are serious, Stacy. They said if I don't have the 15 grand by tonight, they're taking collateral. And guess what counts as collateral?" Her stomach dropped. "No. Frank, no. You're young, pretty enough under all that grease. They'll pay good money for a girl like you." His words were casual, like he was discussing selling a used car instead of his stepdaughter. "So here's what's gonna happen. You're gonna meet me at the hotel entrance at 6 o'clock, and we're gonna take a little drive down to the docks. You do this for me, and we're square. I'll never bother you again." "You're insane." Stacy's hand shook so badly she nearly dropped the phone. "I'm not Frank, you can't be serious. You can't just—" 6 o'clock, Stacy, or I'm coming inside to get you myself, and I'll make a scene big enough that you lose this precious job you're always bitching about." He paused, and she could hear him taking another drink. Don't test me, girl. You owe me for every roof I put over your head, every meal I fed you after your mama ran off. Time to pay up. The line went dead. Stacy stood in that service hallway for a full minute, her heart pounding so hard she thought she might pass out. Frank had threatened her before. That was nothing new. He'd sold her things, stolen her paychecks, forged her signature on credit card applications. But this was different. This was selling her body to murderers to clear his gambling debts. She thought about running, just leaving through the back entrance and never coming back. But where would she go? She had $43 in her bank account and an apartment she couldn't afford. No family except Frank. No friends who could hide her from the kind of people he owed money to. By 3 o'clock, the nausea had started. At first, she'd blamed it on stress and the leftover breakfast sandwich she'd stolen from the kitchen. But it got worse. Waves of sickness that made her grip the serving tray harder, fighting to keep her fake smile in place while her stomach churned. By 4:30, she'd barely made it through serving tea to a group of women dripping in diamonds. One of the kitchen girls, Maria, who'd always been nice to her, had noticed her pale face and shaking hands. You okay, chica? You look like death. I'm fine, just tired. Maria had studied her with knowing eyes. When was your last period? The question hit Stacy like a slap. She'd frozen, tray still in hand, her mind racing backward. 6 weeks? 7? She'd been so exhausted, so stressed about money and Frank's threats, that she hadn't even noticed. Oh my God, she'd whispered. Maria had pressed a wrapped pregnancy test into her palm. Go, now, before the evening rush starts. Employee bathroom on 15 is usually empty this time of day. So Stacy had gone, hands trembling, heart racing, every step up to the 15th floor feeling like walking toward her execution. The test had been positive within seconds. And now she stood in this marble bathroom, staring at proof that her life was over. She was pregnant, with Antonio Ramirez's baby, the most dangerous man in the city. A man who could make her disappear with a phone call. Her phone buzzed again on the counter. Another text from Frank. Clock's ticking, girl. 6 p.m. Don't make me come find you. Then another. The Koreans don't wait. They said they'll take you instead if I don't pay by tonight. Tears blurred her vision. She was trapped, pregnant, broke, with a stepfather trying to sell her to gang traffickers and a baby growing inside her that she couldn't afford to keep. She picked up the test with shaking hands, staring at those 2 pink lines like they might change if she looked hard enough. They didn't. That was when she heard the bathroom door click shut. The air changed, got heavier, dangerous. She turned slowly, already knowing what she'd see. Antonio Ramirez stood in the doorway, blocking her only escape. He was even more devastating up close in the harsh bathroom, lighting all sharp cheekbones and cold authority, his tattoos stark against his tan skin. The serpent on his neck seemed to move with his pulse. His dark eyes locked onto the test in her hand. Show me. It wasn't a request. It was a command from a man who was used to absolute obedience. Stacy's fingers went numb. The test nearly slipped from her grasp. This isn't... Show me. He took a step closer, and she saw the gun holstered at his hip beneath the perfectly cut suit jacket. Now, Stacy, how do you even know my name? The question came out as a broken whisper. Something flickered in his expression, almost amusement. You think I don't know the names of everyone who works my events? You think I didn't notice you 3 weeks ago when you stayed late after your shift? He moved closer. Predator stalking prey. You think I haven't been looking for you? Her back hit the marble counter. Trapped. Please, I'll fix this. I'll take care of it. You don't have to. Take care of it? His voice dropped to something deadly quiet. What exactly does that mean? Before she could answer, the bathroom door exploded inward. Wood splintered. Frank staggered through, his receding hairline slick with sweat, reeking of cheap whiskey and desperation. His bloodshot eyes locked onto Stacy. There you are, you ungrateful little bitch. He lurched forward, grabbing for her arm. I've been calling you for hours. We have to go. Now. The Koreans are waiting at the dock, and if you think I'm taking a beating because you're too prissy to... He stopped. His alcohol-clouded brain finally registered who else was in the bathroom. Antonio Ramirez. The crown prince of violence himself, watching with the cold interest of a cobra deciding whether to strike. Frank's face went sheet white. Oh shit, I wasn't... Finish that sentence, Antonio said softly. Tell me what you were about to do with my waitress. We were just... Frank's hand was still wrapped around Stacy's bicep, fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. Family business, that's all. Nothing to concern yourself with, Mr. Ramirez, sir. We'll just be, let her go. 2 words. Spoken with absolute finality. Frank's hand tightened instead, panic making him stupid. Look, she owes me. I raised her after her whore mother ran off, and now it's time for her to pay me back. The people I owe money to, they're willing to. He didn't get to finish. Antonio moved like death itself. One moment Frank was dragging Stacy toward the door, his filthy hand bruising her arm. The next, Antonio's tattooed fist closed around Frank's wrist with surgical precision. The crack echoed off the marble walls like a gunshot. Frank's scream was high-pitched and animal. He released Stacy instantly, his broken wrist dangling at an unnatural angle as he crumpled to his knees. Tears streamed down his blotchy face, mixing with the sweat and snot already staining his cheap shirt. You broke it, Frank whimpered, cradling his shattered wrist. You broke my... Antonio's foot connected with Frank's shoulder, shoving him flat onto the tile floor. He stood over the sobbing man with the cold detachment of someone who'd caused this kind of pain 1,000 times before. His suit didn't have a single wrinkle out of place. His breathing hadn't even changed. That was for touching her without permission. Antonio adjusted his cufflinks with casual precision, then looked down at Frank like he was examining a crushed insect. If you reach for her again, I'll break every bone in your hand, slowly, 1 finger at a time while my men hold you down. Do we understand each other? Frank nodded frantically, his face pressed against the cold tile, whimpering incomprehensible agreements. Stacy stood frozen against the wall, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. Her arm throbbed where Frank grabbed her. There would be fingerprint-shaped bruises by morning. But what terrified her more than the violence she'd just witnessed was the protective fury radiating from Antonio. The way he'd positioned himself between her and Frank. The way his eyes kept flickering to her, checking for injury. This wasn't how powerful men behaved. They didn't break bones defending waitresses who meant nothing. Unless she meant something now. Antonio's gaze slid past Frank to the marble counter, where the pregnancy test still sat under the harsh lights. 2 pink lines. Undeniable proof. He crossed the space and picked it up with the reverence of a man handling something sacred. His thumb traced the plastic edge. When he looked at Stacy, his dark eyes were blazing with an intensity that stole her breath. How long have you known? 20 minutes. Her voice cracked. I felt sick during my shift. One of the kitchen girls had a test. I needed to know before. Before what? He took a step closer. Before you got rid of my child? The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Stacy shook her head frantically, new tears spilling down her cheeks. I didn't know what else to do. I can barely feed myself. I'm 2 months behind on rent. Frank's creditors are calling me now, and her breath hitched. I can't bring a baby into this. I can't. You're right. Antonio set the test back on the counter with careful deliberation. You can't bring a baby into that life. He turned to face her fully. So I'm taking you out of it. What? You heard me. He closed the distance between them in 2 strides. His hand cupped her face with shocking gentleness, thumb wiping away tears. You're done with double shifts. Done with that apartment. Done with him. He jerked his head toward Frank. You're mine now. Under my protection. Property of the Ramirez family. The word property should have terrified her. But there was something in the way he said it, like she wasn't an object but a treasure. Like property meant protected in his violent world. I don't understand, Stacy whispered. 3 weeks ago you didn't even know my name. 3 weeks ago you weren't carrying the future of my entire bloodline. His hand slid to her stomach, palm pressing flat against her uniform. Do you have any idea what this means? My mother has been lighting candles for 7 years, begging God for a grandchild. The other families have been circling like vultures, waiting for the Ramirez line to end with me. His fingers spread wider, possessive and protective at once. And you, some brave, stubborn waitress who wouldn't leave my mind, you're going to give me what an empire couldn't buy. An heir, a future, a goddamn miracle. Stacy's hands came up to cover his. I don't want to be property. I've been Frank's property my whole life. Beaten and used and sold whenever it was convenient. Antonio's jaw tightened. Then let me be very clear. You will live in my home. Eat my food. Wear clothes that cost more than this entire hotel. My doctor will monitor you weekly. My mother will spoil you. My men will die before they let anyone touch you. His voice dropped. You will want for nothing except the freedom to walk away. Because that, he pulled back to look into her eyes, that you won't have. Not until my child is born safe. Maybe not even then. And if I refuse? His smile was sharp as broken glass. Then I carry you out myself. You can scream and fight if it makes you feel better, but the outcome won't change. He stepped back, adjusting his jacket. You're coming with me. The only question is whether you walk out with dignity or I have to be less gentle. From the floor, Frank moaned. You can't just take her. She's nothing to you. Antonio snapped his fingers, and 2 men in dark suits appeared in the doorway. Bruno, take this trash to the warehouse. I want him to understand what happens to men who sell women. Make it educational. Wait! Frank's voice rose to a shriek as the men grabbed him. Please, I'm sorry, I won't bother her again. Please don't. They dragged him out, his screams echoing down the hallway until a door slammed. Antonio extended his hand to Stacy. Not a question, an inevitability. Come, the car is waiting. Stacy looked at that tattooed hand with its expensive rings. She thought about her freezing apartment, working until her feet bled, the baby inside her that deserved better. She placed her hand in his fingers closed around hers with possessive certainty, and she felt the shift her old life ending, a terrifying new one beginning. Good girl, Antonio murmured, pulling her close enough to smell his cologne mixed with gunpowder. Let's go home. The car was a beast of black steel and tinted windows, idling in the alley behind the Palazzo Grande like a predator waiting to swallow her whole. 2 men in dark suits flanked the rear door, their eyes scanning the surroundings with military precision. They didn't acknowledge Stacy as Antonio guided her forward with a hand at the small of her back, possessive, protective, inescapable. One of the men opened the door, and Stacy caught a glimpse of cream leather interior that probably cost more than everything she'd ever owned combined. Antonio helped her inside with surprising gentleness, then slid in beside her. The door closed with a heavy thunk that sounded like a vault sealing shut. The world outside disappeared behind the tinted glass. Inside, it was just her and him and the smell of expensive leather and his cologne. The driver didn't ask for directions. He already knew where to go. Stacy sat rigid against the seat, her stained uniform a glaring contrast to the pristine interior. She was acutely aware of the dirt smudge still on her jaw, the grease stains on her sleeves, the way her cheap sneakers looked against the carpeted floor. She didn't belong here. Every instinct screamed at her to open the door and run, but Antonio's presence beside her was as effective as any lock. How far? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. 20 minutes. Antonio didn't look at her. He was texting someone, his thumbs moving rapidly across the screen. My mother needs to prepare. Prepare for what? For you. He glanced up, and something in his expression softened almost imperceptibly. She's going to lose her mind when she finds out. In a good way. Stacy's hands twisted in her lap. Does she know about us? About 3 weeks ago? She knows I've been distracted. A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. She's been asking if I met someone. I told her no, because you didn't. The words came out more bitter than she intended. You met a waitress you slept with once and forgot about. Antonio's hand shot out, catching her chin and forcing her to look at him. His grip wasn't painful, but it was absolute. I didn't forget about you, Stacy. Not for one goddamn day. His dark eyes bored into hers. Why do you think I was at the hotel today? I've been coming back every week, trying to find you. You're like a ghost, you work your shifts and disappear before I can catch you. You were looking for me? She couldn't keep the disbelief out of her voice. Did you think that night meant nothing to me? His thumb brushed her bottom lip. I don't bring women to my private suite. I don't spend hours talking with them about their dreams and their scars. And I sure as hell don't let them walk away without getting their number. His jaw tightened, but you slipped out before dawn. And all I had was your first name and the knowledge that you worked somewhere in my hotel. Stacy's breath caught. She remembered that night differently, remembered feeling like Cinderella at midnight, knowing the spell would break and he'd see her for what she really was. So she'd left while he slept, taking nothing but the memory of feeling beautiful for 6 hours. I thought you'd regret it, she whispered. The only thing I regret is not locking the damn door. He released her chin and went back to his phone, but his free hand found hers, threading their fingers together. That won't happen again. The city slid past the windows' familiar streets, giving way to neighborhoods Stacy had only seen from bus windows. The buildings got bigger, the lawns more manicured, the walls higher. This was where people like Antonio lived. People who didn't worry about rent or electricity bills or whether they could afford to eat and pay for heat in the same week. Eventually, they turned through massive iron gates that swung open silently. The driveway curved through perfectly landscaped grounds, and then the mansion came into view. Stacy's breath stopped. It wasn't a house. It was a fortress disguised as a Mediterranean villa, 3 stories of cream stone and terracotta tiles, with balconies wrapped in wrought iron and windows that gleamed like watchful eyes. Armed men patrolled the grounds. Security cameras perched on every corner. This wasn't a home. It was a compound designed to keep the world out and its occupants safe. Or trapped, depending on your perspective. The car stopped at the front entrance, where marble steps led up to double doors that could stop a tank. Antonio exited first, then extended his hand to help her out. Stacy's legs felt like water as she stood, staring up at the mansion that was about to become her prison. "Breathe," Antonio murmured. "They're not going to hurt you." "Who's they?" But she didn't get an answer because the front doors burst open and a tiny hurricane of a woman came rushing down the steps. Mama Elena Ramirez was barely 5 feet tall, but she radiated the kind of authority that made grown men cower. Her silver-streaked black hair was pulled into an elegant bun, and she was wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than Stacy's car. Gold jewelry glinted at her throat and wrists, but it was her eyes, the same dark, intense eyes as her son that pinned Stacy in place. "Mijo." She reached Antonio and grabbed his face, kissing both cheeks rapidly while speaking in rapid-fire Spanish. Then her gaze swung to Stacy, and those sharp eyes took in everything: the dirty uniform, the exhaustion, the way Stacy unconsciously held her stomach. Mama Elena went completely still. Her hand rose to her mouth. "Madre de Dios," she breathed. "Is it true? What you texted me, is it true?" Antonio's arm wrapped around Stacy's waist, anchoring her to his side. "See, Mama, she's carrying your grandchild." The sound that came out of Mama Elena was half sob, half prayer. She surged forward, and Stacy flinched instinctively, expecting violence. But instead, the older woman dropped to her knees on the marble steps and grabbed both of Stacy's hands, pressing them to her tear-stained cheeks. "Gracias a Dios," Mama Elena sobbed, kissing Stacy's knuckles over and over. Thank you, mihija. You have given us a miracle, a blessing from heaven itself." Stacy stood frozen, completely overwhelmed. This woman, this terrifying matriarch of a crime family, was on her knees, crying and kissing the hands of a broke waitress. It didn't make sense. None of this made sense. I don't," Stacy's voice cracked. "I'm sorry, I don't understand." Mama Elena rose, still clutching Stacy's hands like they were made of gold. 7 years, she said, her English heavily accented but clear. 7 years I have prayed for this. Every Sunday, I light candles. Every night, I beg the Virgin for a grandchild to carry our name. Fresh tears spilled down her weathered cheeks. "And you are the answer to every prayer." "Mama," Antonio said gently. "You're overwhelming her." "Overwhelming?" Mama Elena finally released Stacy's hands, only to cup her face instead. "Mija, forgive me. You must be exhausted. Hungry. Come inside. I have food prepared. The doctor is on his way. We must make sure you and the baby are healthy." "There's a doctor coming?" Stacy's panic rose. "I can't afford. You don't pay for anything anymore," Antonio said firmly. "Not today. Not ever." Mama Elena looped her arm through Stacy's, already pulling her toward the entrance. "Come, let me show you your home. Everything is being prepared for you." The interior of the mansion was even more overwhelming than the exterior. Marble floors stretched endlessly. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings. Art that belonged in museums decorated the walls. Stacy's sneakers squeaked on the polished floor, and she was terrified to touch anything in case she broke something worth more than her life. But Mama Elena didn't lead her to the formal sitting rooms or the dining hall. Instead, she guided Stacy up a sweeping staircase to the 2nd floor, chattering the entire time in a mix of Spanish and English about prenatal vitamins and nursery colors and family heirlooms. They stopped in front of a closed door. Mama Elena's eyes were shining with fresh tears as she pushed it open. Stacy stepped inside and her heart stopped. She'd expected a bedroom, maybe a dungeon, something dark and confining that matched her fear. Instead, she found herself standing in a half-finished nursery that looked like it was designed by angels. The walls were painted a soft cream, and workers were installing custom shelving. A crib made of dark wood sat in the center, clearly handcrafted, probably worth thousands. Boxes overflowed with baby clothes, blankets, toys still in their packaging. "We started preparing the moment Antonio texted me," Mama Elena said softly. "I have been buying things for years, hoping, always hoping." Stacy walked forward in a daze, her fingers brushing the edge of the crib. The wood was smooth as silk, carved with intricate patterns of roses and crosses. A mobile hung above it, delicate silver stars and moons that caught the light. "This is too much," she whispered. "I don't deserve." "You deserve everything." Mama Elena appeared beside her, taking her hand again. "You are carrying the future of this family. You are precious beyond measure." But Stacy didn't feel precious. She felt like a fraud in a stained uniform standing in a nursery that cost more than she'd make in a lifetime. She didn't belong here. She wasn't a princess or a queen or whatever they thought she was. She was just Stacy Peters, the girl who couldn't even keep her own stepfather from trying to sell her. "Let me show you your room," Mama Elena said, already guiding her toward another door. "You'll need to rest before the doctor arrives." The bedroom connected to the nursery was 3 times the size of Stacy's entire apartment. A massive 4-poster bed dominated the space, covered in what looked like Egyptian cotton. The attached bathroom, visible through an open door, had a tub the size of a small pool. The walk-in closet beyond was already filled with clothes, designer labels, silks and cashmeres, shoes in her exact size arranged like a boutique display. "How did you know my size?" Stacy breathed. Antonio appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame. "I told you. I've been looking for you. I know more about you than you think." It should have felt threatening. Instead, it felt like being seen for the first time in her life. Mama Elena squeezed Stacy's hand once more. "Rest, mija. I'll bring you food. The doctor will be here in an hour." She switched to rapid Spanish, directed at her son, then kissed Stacy's forehead and swept out of the room, leaving Stacy alone with Antonio. He closed the distance between them slowly, giving her time to bolt if she wanted. But there was nowhere to run. And honestly, she was too tired to try. "I know this is overwhelming," he said quietly. "I know you're scared, but you're safe here, Stacy. Safer than you've ever been." She looked up at him, this beautiful, dangerous man who'd upended her entire world in a single afternoon. "What if I can't do this? What if I can't be what you need me to be?" His hand cupped her face with devastating gentleness. "You already are. You're carrying my child. Everything else is just details." But as Stacy stood in this palace of a room wearing her stained uniform and dirty sneakers, surrounded by clothes worth more than she'd ever earned, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was playing dress-up in someone else's life. That any moment, someone would realize the mistake and send her back where she belonged. To nowhere. To nothing. To the invisible girl no one saw. Absolutely not. Antonio's voice was flat, final. He stood in the doorway of her new bedroom with his arms crossed, looking at Stacy like she'd just suggested walking into enemy territory unarmed. Which, from his perspective, she probably had. "I need my final paycheck," Stacy insisted, clutching the designer blouse Mama Elena had laid out for her. She'd showered the first truly hot shower she'd had in months, and the bathroom mirror had shown her a different person. Clean, cared for, but still her. "I worked 2 weeks. That's $400, Antonio. I need it to pay my landlord so he doesn't throw my stuff on the street. I'll have someone collect your belongings." He didn't move from the doorway. "I'll pay your landlord triple what you owe him to keep his mouth shut." Problem solved. "That's not the point." Stacy's hands tightened on the silk fabric. "I worked for that money. I earned it. And I'm not going to just disappear like some kept woman who— You are a kept woman now." His words were blunt, unapologetic. "That's exactly what you are. Mine to keep. Mine to protect. Mine to provide for." The possessive declarations should have made her angry. Instead, they made her feel something dangerously close to safe. But she'd been dependent on men before, on Frank, who used her like currency. She wouldn't go from one cage to another without at least trying to maintain some dignity. 2 hours, she said firmly. "Let me go back, finish my shift properly, get my check, and say goodbye to the girls who've been nice to me. Then I'll come back here and be your whatever you want me to be. But let me close that chapter myself." Antonio studied her for a long moment, and she could see the war happening behind his dark eyes. Every instinct he had was probably screaming at him to lock her in this room where nothing could touch her. But something else flickered there too. Respect, maybe, for the fact that she wasn't just rolling over. "Fine." He stepped into the room, closing the distance between them. "But you don't go alone. Bruno and Marco will be with you every second. You don't leave their sight. And if anything feels wrong, you leave immediately. Understood?" Stacy nodded, relief flooding through her. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." His hand cupped the back of her neck, pulling her close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "If something happens to you or my child because of this, I'll burn that hotel to the ground with everyone inside. So you better come back to me safe, Stacy. Because the alternative is scorched earth. He meant it. She could see it in the cold promise of violence lurking beneath his controlled exterior. Antonio Ramirez didn't make idle threats. "I'll be careful," she whispered. He released her slowly, like it physically pained him to let go. 2 hours. Not a minute more. The Palazzo Grande looked different when you arrived in an armored SUV with 2 men built like brick walls flanking you. The staff entrance, the one Stacy had used twice a day for 2 years, suddenly felt foreign, hostile even. Bruno and Marco didn't speak, but their presence screamed danger to anyone paying attention. The kitchen girls noticed immediately. Maria's eyes went wide when Stacy walked in wearing designer jeans and a silk blouse instead of her uniform. The others whispered, shooting glances between her and the 2 stone-faced guards who positioned themselves at the door. "Stacy?" Maria approached cautiously. "Girl, what happened? You just disappeared. And then we heard Frank was..." She lowered her voice. "Is it true? Did Antonio Ramirez really break his arm?" "His wrist," Stacy corrected quietly. "Frank was trying to sell me to pay his debts." "Mister?" Ramirez stopped him. The kitchen went dead silent. Every eye was on her now. "And now you're what? With him?" Maria's gaze dropped to Stacy's stomach, then back up. Understanding dawned. Oh. Stacy's cheeks burned. "I just came to get my final check and clear out my locker. Then I'm leaving." "Good." Maria squeezed her arm. "Get out of here while you can. Men like that, they're dangerous, Stacy. Even if they're protecting you now." But before Stacy could respond, the kitchen manager appeared in the doorway, his face flushed. "Peters, you're needed in the executive lounge." "Now." Stacy's stomach dropped. "I'm not on shift. I just came to." "Now, Peters." He was already walking away, expecting her to follow. Bruno stepped forward, his massive frame blocking her path. "The boss said you don't leave our site." "It's fine." Stacy touched his arm, an absurdly small gesture given his size. "It's just the executive lounge. Probably a complaint I need to resolve before I quit." Bruno and Marco exchanged a look. Then Marco pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. 30 seconds later he nodded. "Boss says we escort you. We stay in visual range." The executive lounge was on the 15th floor, the same floor where everything had changed that afternoon. It was a private space reserved for the hotel's wealthiest guests and special events. Stacy had only been inside a handful of times, always carrying trays and keeping her eyes down. That day, only one person occupied the elegant space. Isabella Moretti sat on the leather sofa like a queen holding court, her legs crossed at the ankle in a pose that screamed old money and finishing schools. She was devastating in the way only the truly wealthy could be. Her dark hair fell in perfect waves. Her cream-colored dress probably cost more than Stacy made all year, and diamonds glittered at her throat and ears. But it was her eyes that made Stacy's blood run cold. Cold, calculating, and full of barely concealed rage. "So," Isabella said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "you're the little nobody who's been spreading her legs for my fiancé." Stacy froze in the doorway. Bruno and Marco tensed behind her. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" Isabella rose gracefully, picking up a wine glass from the side table. She swirled the deep red liquid, examining it like she was examining Stacy. "Antonio Ramirez, 6'3", covered in tattoos, owns half this city? Ring any bells? Or do you service so many wealthy men that you've lost count?" The insult landed like a slap. Stacy's hands curled into fists. We're not." "Oh, but you are." Isabella glided closer, and Stacy caught the scent of her perfume, something floral and expensive. "Did you really think he wouldn't tell me? Our families have been planning our union for 3 years. A merger of the Ramirez and Moretti empires. Power, territory, legitimacy." Her smile was razor sharp. "And then you, some dirty little waitress, decided to trap him with a pregnancy." Heat flooded Stacy's face. "I didn't trap anyone." "Please." Isabella circled her like a shark. "Women like you have been using this trick since the dawn of time. Spread your legs, skip a pill, and suddenly you're set for life." She stopped directly in front of Stacy, so close their faces were inches apart. "But here's what you don't understand. Antonio might be playing house with you right now because you're carrying his mistake. But once that baby is born, you're disposable. He'll take the child and send you back to whatever gutter he found you in. That's not, isn't it?" Isabella's perfectly manicured finger traced down Stacy's cheek. "Look at yourself. You're wearing expensive clothes, but you can't hide what you are. I can see it in the way you stand slouched, uncertain, like you're waiting for someone to kick you. You don't belong in his world. And you never will. Tears burned behind Stacy's eyes. But she refused to let them fall. Refused to give this woman the satisfaction. Isabella must have seen the tears anyway because her smile widened. Oh, how precious. The gold digger has feelings. She raised her wine glass. Let me make this simple for you, darling. Antonio is mine. The alliance between our families is worth more than your entire bloodline. So whatever fantasy you're entertaining about being his queen, she tilted the glass. Consider this your wake-up call. The wine splashed across Stacy's chest in a crimson wave. Cold liquid soaked through her silk blouse, dripping down to stain her designer jeans. The smell was overwhelming, expensive Bordeaux that cost more per bottle than Stacy made in a week. Oops. Isabella's voice was sickly sweet. How clumsy of me. But I suppose you're used to being dirty, aren't you? Dirt under your nails, grease in your hair, serving people who are better than you. She set the empty glass down. Go ahead and clean yourself up, waitress. That's what you're good for, isn't it? Cleaning up other people's messes? Behind Stacy, Bruno and Marco moved forward, but Stacy held up a hand. Her whole body was shaking with humiliation, with rage, with the desperate need to prove this woman wrong. You're right, Stacy said quietly. I'm not like you. I wasn't born with a silver spoon and a trust fund. I've worked every day of my life for scraps while people like you threw away more food than I could afford to buy. She stepped closer, refusing to back down even with wine dripping down her stomach. But you know what that taught me? How to fight for what I have. How to survive. How to protect the people I love. She placed a protective hand over her stomach. So go ahead and plan your alliance. Plot your merger. Convince yourself that you matter to him. Stacy's voice dropped. But we both know the truth. If you were what he wanted, I wouldn't be carrying his baby right now. I'd just be another waitress serving your engagement party. Isabella's face contorted with rage. Her hand flew up, clearly intending to slap, but Bruno was there in an instant, his massive hand catching Isabella's wrist mid-swing. I wouldn't, he said calmly. Isabella yanked her hand free, stumbling back. Do you know who I am? Who my father is? Yes, ma'am. Marco stepped forward now too. Which is why we're going to pretend this didn't happen. You're going to leave, and we're going to take Miss Peters back home where she belongs. This isn't over, Isabella hissed at Stacy. You have no idea what you've started. She stormed out, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. The door slammed behind her. Stacy stood there, wine-soaked and shaking, feeling the weight of what had just happened. She'd made an enemy that day. A powerful, vengeful enemy who wouldn't rest until Stacy was destroyed. Bruno touched her shoulder gently. Time to go home, miss. Home. To the mansion. To Antonio. To a world where she didn't belong but had no choice but to inhabit. Stacy looked down at her ruined designer clothes and laughed a broken, slightly hysterical sound. I didn't even get my paycheck. The phone call came at 3 a.m. Stacy jerked awake in the massive bed she still couldn't get used to, her heart pounding. For a confused moment, she didn't know where she was. The sheets were too soft, the room too large, the darkness too complete. Then she remembered. The mansion. Antonio. The baby growing inside her that changed everything. Antonio's side of the bed was empty and cold. He'd held her the night before after Bruno and Marco brought her home, wine-soaked and shaking, had helped her into the shower and washed the stench of Isabella's cruelty from her skin with a tenderness that made her cry harder than the humiliation had. Then he'd held her until she fell asleep, his hand protective over her stomach. Now voices echoed from somewhere downstairs. Angry voices. Male voices speaking rapid Spanish punctuated by words even Stacy's limited knowledge could identify as curses. She wrapped herself in the silk robe Mama Elena had left for her and padded barefoot to the door. The marble hallway was dimly lit by wall sconces, and the voices grew louder as she descended the grand staircase. They were coming from Antonio's study, a room she hadn't been invited into yet. The door was slightly ajar. Through the gap, she could see Antonio behind his massive desk, still dressed despite the hour. Bruno stood beside him, and 3 other men she didn't recognize filled the room with barely contained violence. Found them in the employee locker. One of the men was saying, The waitress's locker. Number 47. Registered to Stacy Peters. Stacy's blood turned to ice. How much? Antonio's voice was deadly quiet. $500,000 in uncut diamonds. The shipment that went missing from the Moretti warehouse last month. The man placed something on the desk, a velvet pouch that glittered even in the low light. Marco Moretti is demanding a meeting. He says we're harboring a rat. Says the girl is working for the Colombians, using her position to steal intelligence and product. That's bullshit. Bruno's voice was a growl. The girl doesn't even know what business we're in. She's standing right there. Antonio's gaze lifted to the doorway, pinning Stacy in place. His face was unreadable, but something dangerous lurked in his dark eyes. Come in, Stacy, since this concerns you. Stacy's legs felt like water, but she forced herself to walk into the study. 5 sets of eyes tracked her movement, 4 hostile, 1 inscrutable. She clutched the robe tighter around herself, acutely aware that she was wearing nothing underneath. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, her voice smaller than she'd like. What diamonds? What locker? Your locker at the Palazzo Grande. Antonio leaned back in his chair, studying her like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve. The one registered in your name, the one that now contains 500,000 in stolen Moretti diamonds. I would never. Stacy's hands shook. Antonio, I don't even have access to diamonds. I'm a waitress. I serve food and clean tables. She's lying. The man who'd spoken before stepped forward, his hand resting on the gun at his hip. Boss, the Morettis are demanding justice. If we don't handle this, they'll see it as weakness. They'll think we're protecting a rat because you're sleeping with her. Watch your mouth, Antonio said softly, dangerously. The man swallowed but continued. With all due respect, she shows up out of nowhere. Suddenly pregnant with your kid? Right when the Moretti alliance is about to be finalized? It's too convenient. She could be a plant. A long-game operation to destabilize the family from the inside. Stacy's vision blurred with tears. This was it. This was how it ended. They thought she was a spy, a thief, and there was no way to prove otherwise. She was going to die in this mansion wearing borrowed silk, and her baby would die with her. I'm not... Her voice broke. Please, I'm not working for anyone. I don't know anything about your business. I just wanted to survive. That's all I've ever wanted. Antonio's jaw tightened. He looked at the diamonds, then at Stacy, then back at the men. Everyone out. Boss. Out. The word cracked like a whip. The men filed out reluctantly, Bruno lingering until Antonio's glare sent him away too. The door closed with a heavy thud, leaving Stacy alone with the man who held her life in his hands. The silence stretched like piano wire about to snap. Did you do it? Antonio asked finally. No. Stacy's voice was stronger now, fueled by desperation. I swear on this baby's life, I didn't touch those diamonds. I don't even know what they look like. I've never stolen anything in my life except food when Frank wouldn't feed me. Someone put them there. He stood, moving around the desk with predatory grace. Someone who had access to your locker. Someone who knew where to find you. Realization hit Stacy like a freight train. Isabella. Antonio went very still. Explain. Yesterday, at the hotel. After she poured wine on me. Stacy's mind raced, putting pieces together. She left before us. She had time. And she said it wasn't over, that I had no idea what I'd started. She threatened you. It wasn't a question. She said you were hers, that the alliance was worth more than my entire bloodline, that once the baby was born, you'd throw me away. Tears spilled down Stacy's cheeks. She's trying to get rid of me before that can happen. If you think I'm a rat, you'll... She couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't say the words. Antonio cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. I will what, Stacy? Kill you? Execute the mother of my child based on planted evidence? His thumb wiped away her tears. You really think that little of me? I don't know what to think, she whispered. Your man has a gun. Your family has rules. I'm nobody, and those diamonds are worth nothing. The word was absolute. They're worth nothing compared to you and my child. Nothing. He released her and pulled out his phone. Bruno, I need the hotel security footage from yesterday. Every camera on the 15th floor and in the employee areas. I want to know everyone who went near locker 47 between 3 p.m. and midnight. He hung up and looked at Stacy. If Isabella did this, I'll have proof within the hour. And then, his smile was cold as winter. Then the Moretti family is going to learn what happens when they threaten what's mine. The footage arrived 40 minutes later. Antonio watched it on his laptop while Stacy sat curled in the leather chair across from his desk, her knees pulled to her chest. She could see the screen from there, grainy black and white images of the hotel corridors. There. At 4:17 p.m., Isabella Moretti walked through the employee area like she owned it. Her designer dress out of place among the industrial lockers. She looked both ways, then pulled out a key. How did she get a key? And opened locker 47. She removed the velvet pouch from her purse, placed it inside, then closed the locker and walked away. The whole thing took less than 30 seconds. Antonio played it again. And again. His face was carved from stone, but his hands curled into fists on the desk. That's stupid, arrogant. He cut himself off, breathing hard through his nose. Then he picked up his phone. Call a commission meeting. Tonight. Every family head. Tell them it's urgent. He paused. And make sure Marco Moretti brings his daughter. The commission met in a warehouse on the edge of Ramirez territory. Stacy wasn't supposed to be there. Women rarely attended these gatherings, but Antonio insisted. They need to see you, he'd said, while she dressed in the black dress Mama Elena selected. They need to see what the Morettis tried to destroy. The warehouse had been converted into a makeshift conference room. 5 families represented by 5 men, all of them dangerous in their own right. Marco Moretti sat across from Antonio, his silver hair slicked back, his expression smug. Isabella stood behind him, her face carefully neutral, until she saw Stacy. Then something flickered surprise, then rage. Thank you for coming, Antonio began, his voice carrying through the space. We're here because of an accusation. Marco Moretti claims my woman is a rat who stole from his family. He demands justice. Not just justice, Marco said coldly. Execution. That's the law. Rats die. Agreed. Antonio's smile was razor sharp. Rats do die, which is why I've brought evidence. He pressed a button, and the security footage played on the screen behind him. The other families watched in silence as Isabella planted the diamonds. The timestamp was clear. The footage was undeniable. Marco's face drained of color. Isabella's mouth opened, then closed. Your daughter, Antonio said softly, framed an innocent pregnant woman for theft. She planted evidence to force my hand, to make me kill the mother of my child. He stood, and every eye in the room followed him. That's not just an insult to me. That's an act of war against the Ramirez family. Antonio, wait. Marco half rose from his seat. Isabella, what did you do? She was in my way. Isabella's composure cracked. That filthy waitress trapped you with a pregnancy. She doesn't belong in our world. I was protecting our families, protecting the alliance. By trying to murder my heir? Antonio's voice could cut glass. By framing my woman as a traitor? The warehouse went deathly silent. The alliance is over, Antonio declared. The Moretti family has broken faith, broken sacred law, and I will not rest until they've paid for threatening what's mine. He looked at each family head in turn. Anyone who stands with the Morettis stands against the Ramirez family. Choose wisely. Marco was on his feet now, desperate. Please, let's talk about this. My daughter made a mistake, but we can... Your daughter tried to have my woman killed. Antonio's hand found Stacy's, pulling her to stand beside him. This is Stacy Peters. She carries my son, and anyone who harms her or my child will burn. His eyes locked on Isabella. Starting with you. The warehouse felt like a tomb. Isabella stood frozen behind her father's chair, her face sheet white, while Marco Moretti looked like he'd aged 10 years in the last 10 minutes. The other 3 family heads, Chen, Volkov, and DeLuca, watched the unfolding disaster with the careful neutrality of men who knew a single wrong word could start a bloodbath. Antonio hadn't released Stacy's hand. His grip was firm, possessive, and she could feel the barely controlled violence radiating from him like heat from a furnace. She wanted to shrink away, to make herself invisible the way she'd done her entire life. But his hold wouldn't let her. He was positioning her in front of these dangerous men like she was something precious, something worth destroying families over. Antonio. Marco's voice was careful, placating. Let's not be hasty. Isabella made a grave error in judgment. Yes, but she tried to frame my woman for treason. Antonio's voice was ice. She planted evidence that would have gotten Stacy executed. That would have killed my unborn child. He paused, letting the weight of those words sink in. In our world, Marco, there are rules, sacred rules. We don't target pregnant women. We don't murder children. And we sure as hell don't frame innocents to settle personal vendettas. I know. Marco held up his hands in a gesture of surrender. And Isabella will be punished. I give you my word. But the alliance between our families is over. Antonio cut him off. The moment your daughter walked into that hotel with stolen diamonds and a plan to murder the mother of my heir, the alliance died. There's no coming back from this, Marco. Not now. Not ever. Volkov, a massive Russian with scars crossing his face, leaned forward. This is bad for business, Ramirez. War between families is expensive, messy. The feds will circle like sharks. Then the Morettis should have thought of that before declaring war on me. Antonio's jaw was set. I didn't start this, but I'm damn well going to finish it. She's just a waitress. Isabella's voice cracked through the tension like breaking glass. All eyes turned to her. She's nothing, a nobody who got lucky one night and trapped you with a pregnancy. And now you're throwing away 3 years of planning, millions in territory agreements. Strategic advantages for what? For her? Isabella's finger stabbed toward Stacy with pure venom. Look at her. She doesn't even belong here. She's terrified, out of her depth, wearing clothes we bought her because she couldn't afford her own. In 6 months, you'll be bored of her. In a year, you'll resent her. But this alliance? This could have made our families untouchable. The words hit their mark. Stacy felt every eye in the room assess her, this scared girl in a borrowed dress, clutching the hand of a man so far above her station they might as well be different species. Isabella was right. She didn't belong here. She was playing dress-up in a world where one wrong move meant death. You're right about one thing, Antonio said quietly. Dangerously. Stacy doesn't belong here. She's too good for this world. Too pure for the blood and violence that defines us. He turned to look at her, and something in his expression made Stacy's breath catch. She should be anywhere but in a warehouse full of killers. But she's here because you forced my hand, Isabella. You made her a target. So now I have to make her untouchable. He released Stacy's hand and reached into his jacket. When his hand emerged, he was holding a small velvet box, the kind that held rings. Stacy's heart stopped. Antonio, what are you? 3 weeks ago, he said, his voice carrying through the warehouse. I met a woman who made me forget every rule I've ever lived by. She was beautiful, yes. But more than that, she was real. Honest. Working herself to death for scraps and still finding the strength to smile. He opened the box, revealing a ring that made Stacy's vision blur. The emerald was the size of her thumbnail, a deep green that seemed to glow with inner fire. It was surrounded by diamonds that caught the warehouse lights like stars. The band was platinum, engraved with patterns that looked ancient. Priceless didn't begin to describe it. This ring, Antonio continued, belonged to my grandmother. She wore it for 60 years, through 2 wars, 5 assassination attempts, and the building of everything the Ramirez family is today. He lifted the ring from its velvet cradle. My mother gave it to me the day I became Dawn. She told me to save it for the woman who would stand beside me when the world tried to burn us down. He took Stacy's left hand, and she realized she was shaking. Stacy Peters, you carry my child, my heir, the future of everything my family has built. His dark eyes locked on hers. But more than that, you carry my heart. And I will destroy anyone who tries to take you from me. Antonio, her voice broke. I can't, this is... Say yes. His thumb stroked her knuckles. Say yes and become my Donna, my queen, untouchable under the laws that govern our world, protected by every man loyal to the Ramirez name. Tears streamed down Stacy's face. This wasn't a proposal born from love, not really. It was a strategic move, a power play to protect her and his child. But the way he was looking at her, the tenderness in his dangerous hands, the absolute certainty in his voice, it felt real. It felt like maybe, just maybe, she mattered beyond the baby in her womb. Yes, she whispered. The ring slid onto her finger with perfect precision, like it was made for her. The emerald caught the light, throwing green fire across her skin. It was heavy-weighted with history and blood and power. Antonio brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles with devastating gentleness. Then he turned to face the commission, and his voice rang out with absolute authority. Stacy Peters is now Stacy Ramirez, my Donna, queen of the Ramirez cartel. Under the laws of our commission, she is untouchable, sacred. Any harm that comes to her is harm to me. Any threat against her is a declaration of war against my entire family. His gaze swept across each man present. The 5 families recognize this claim, as witnessed here today. Do any of you dispute it? Silence. Then Chen stood, bowing slightly toward Stacy. The Chen family recognizes Donna Ramirez. Volkov rose next. The Volkov family recognizes Donna Ramirez. DeLuca was slower, but eventually stood. The DeLuca family recognizes Donna Ramirez. All eyes turned to Marco Moretti. The old man looked like he'd swallowed glass. Beside him, Isabella's face was twisted with rage and disbelief. But Marco was no fool, he knew when he was beaten. The Moretti family, he said heavily, recognizes Donna Ramirez. Good. Antonio pulled Stacy closer, tucking her against his side. Then let me make one more thing perfectly clear. My Donna is pregnant, vulnerable, and under my protection every second of every day. If she so much as stubs her toe, I will assume it's an attack and respond accordingly. His smile was wolf-sharp. Isabella learned today what happens when you threaten my family. Don't make the same mistake. He guided Stacy toward the warehouse exit, and his men fell into formation around them, a wall of violence protecting their queen. As they passed Isabella, Stacy caught the pure hatred in the other woman's eyes. This wasn't over. Isabella might have lost this battle, but the look on her face promised war. Outside, the night air was cold and clean after the suffocating tension of the warehouse. The armored SUV waited with doors already open. Antonio helped Stacy inside, then slid in beside her. The door closed, sealing them in leather and safety. Stacy stared at the ring on her finger, the emerald glowing in the dim interior light. I'm your wife now. Donna, Antonio corrected. Wife implies a choice. Donna is a title, a position. You rule beside me now, whether you're ready or not. I'm not ready. The confession spilled out before she could stop it. I don't know how to be a queen. I barely know how to be a person who matters. 3 days ago, I was invisible. Now She couldn't finish. Antonio's hand cupped her face, turning her to look at him. You're mine. That's all you need to be. Everything else, we'll figure out together. His thumb traced her cheekbone. But understand this, Stacy. I didn't put that ring on your finger just to protect you. I could have done that 100 other ways. I did it because when I look at you, I see the only person in this entire blood-soaked world who makes me want to be something more than a monster. You're not a monster, she whispered. Yes, I am. His smile was sad. But maybe with you I can be a monster who protects something beautiful instead of just destroying everything I touch. The SUV started moving, carrying them back to the mansion. Back to the gilded cage that was slowly starting to feel like home. Stacy looked down at her ring, this priceless symbol of a claiming she didn't ask for but desperately needed. She was Donna Ramirez now, queen of a criminal empire, untouchable under laws written in blood. But as she caught her reflection in the window, her face still uncertain, still, that of the scared waitress who took a pregnancy test 4 days ago. She couldn't shake the feeling that the most dangerous part was just beginning, because Isabella Moretti had just watched the man she expected to marry crown another woman instead. And women like Isabella didn't forgive. They destroyed. Isabella Moretti sat in her Bentley outside the seediest bar in the city, her designer dress and diamond earrings absurdly out of place among the pawn shops and liquor stores. Her knuckles were white where she gripped the steering wheel, and her perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the rage burning in her eyes. 3 days since the commission meeting. 3 days since Antonio Ramirez put that obscene emerald on the waitress's finger and declared her untouchable. 3 days of her father's disappointment, the whispers among the other families, the pitying looks from women who used to envy her. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through the photos again, surveillance images her private investigator compiled. Stacy Peters. No, Stacy Ramirez now. The name tasted like poison. Here she was, leaving a prenatal appointment with 4 bodyguards surrounding her like she was royalty. Here she was on the mansion balcony, Antonio's hand protective on her growing stomach. Here she was wearing clothes that cost more than most people made in a year, that emerald catching the light like a beacon announcing her victory. Isabella's perfectly manicured nails dug into her palm hard enough to draw blood. She was supposed to be the one in those photos. She was supposed to be the Donna, ruling beside the most powerful man in the city. 3 years of carefully orchestrated meetings, of family negotiations, of positioning herself as the perfect strategic match, destroyed by a pregnant waitress in less than a week. The bar door swung open, and a pathetic figure stumbled out. Frank Peters, even more wretched than the photos suggested. His arm was in a cast from where Antonio broke his wrist. His clothes were stained and rumpled, and he walked with the unsteady gait of a man who'd been drinking since noon. He looked around the parking lot with the paranoid fear of someone who owed money to dangerous people. Isabella checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, fixed her lipstick, and stepped out of the Bentley. Frank froze when he saw her approaching. Lady, if you're lost. Frank Peters? Her voice was crisp, authoritative. Stepfather of Stacy Peters? His bloodshot eyes narrowed with suspicion and something that might be hope. Who's asking? Someone who can solve your problems. Isabella gestured to the Bentley. Get in. We need to talk. I don't. Frank's gaze slid to the car, calculating. What kind of problems? The kind that involves $15,000 in gambling debts to the Korean gang. The kind that got your wrist broken by Antonio Ramirez. Isabella smiled, cold and sharp. The kind that disappear when you do exactly what I tell you to. That got his attention. Frank shuffled closer, reeking of beer and desperation. You're offering to pay my debts? I'm offering to erase them completely. $20,000 enough to clear what you owe and give you a fresh start somewhere far from here. She let that sink in. All you have to do is help me with one small problem. Frank's eyes gleamed with greedy interest. What kind of problem? The kind named Stacy. Isabella opened the car door. Get in, Mr. Peters. Let's discuss how your stepdaughter stole something that belongs to me, and how we're going to make her give it back. Inside the Bentley, Isabella poured Frank a glass of scotch from the crystal decanter in her console. It was probably worth more than he'd earned in his entire life, but she needed him cooperative, malleable, desperate enough to do something unthinkable. Frank drained the glass in one gulp. So what's this about, Stacy? I heard she's playing house with the Ramirez family now. Got herself knocked up and thinks she's some kind of princess. She's not a princess. Isabella's voice dripped with venom. She's a thief who trapped a powerful man with a pregnancy and is now living off his money like the parasite she's always been. Frank laughed a bitter, ugly sound. Sounds about right. Girl always thought she was better than me. Too good to help her old man out when he needed it. Now she's living in a mansion while I'm hiding from loan sharks. Exactly. Isabella leaned forward, her eyes locked on his. She used you, Frank. Abandoned you the moment she found something better. And now she's going to have everything, wealth, power, security, while you have nothing. Doesn't that make you angry? Damn right it does. Frank's face flushed red. I raised that ungrateful brat. Fed her, clothed her, kept a roof over her head after her whore mother ran off. And this is how she repays me? By running off with some gangster and leaving me to rot? She's worse than ungrateful. Isabella refilled his glass, her mind working through the plan she'd been crafting for 3 sleepless nights. She's dangerous. That baby she's carrying? It's going to inherit the Ramirez empire. Billions in assets, control over half the city, and Stacy will have power you can't even imagine. So what? Frank took another drink. I can't touch her now. You saw what Ramirez did to my wrist. If I go near her, he'll kill me. Not if he doesn't know it's you. Isabella's smile was serpentine. What if I told you there's a way to get revenge on Stacy, earn your $20,000, and disappear before Ramirez ever figures out what happened? Frank's eyes narrowed with suspicion and interest. I'm listening. In 3 days, there's a shipment arriving at the docks. $30 million in product from the Colombian cartels. Antonio has to be there personally. It's too important to delegate. Every one of his men will be focused on security for that meeting. Isabella's voice dropped to something conspiratorial. Which means Stacy will be alone at the mansion with minimal protection. Just her and 1 or 2 bodyguards. You want me to go to the Ramirez mansion? Frank laughed, but there was fear in it. Lady, that place is a fortress. There's no way. There's a back entrance. A service gate used by the kitchen staff and gardeners. The security there is lighter. They rely on the perimeter being impenetrable. Isabella pulled out her phone, showing him blueprints she'd acquired through contacts she'd rather not name. You go in through here during the shift change. Grab Stacy. Bring her to me. Frank stared at the blueprints, then at Isabella. And then what? You kill her? Because I'm not going down for murder. I'm not going to kill her. Isabella's voice was honey-sweet poison. I'm going to make her lose that baby. A little rough handling, some stress, maybe a tumble down some stairs. Miscarriages happen all the time, especially in the first trimester. So tragic, so devastating for poor Antonio. The words hung in the air between them, ugly and monstrous. Frank shifted uncomfortably. She's still my stepdaughter, and that's pretty dark, lady. She abandoned you. Isabella's voice hardened. She let Ramirez break your wrist and throw you out like garbage. She's living in luxury while you're drowning in debt. And you're worried about her feelings? I'm worried about Ramirez coming after me when he finds out. He won't find out. Isabella reached into her purse and pulled out a thick envelope. $20,000 in cash. 10 now. 10 when you deliver her to me. Take the money, disappear to another city, another state. By the time Ramirez realizes what happened, you'll be gone. Untraceable. Frank stared at the envelope like it was salvation and damnation wrapped together. His hand trembled as he reached for it. And if something goes wrong? If I get caught? You won't. Isabella's smile didn't reach her eyes. I've planned every detail. The shift change is at 3 p.m. Antonio will be at the docks from 2 to 6. You grab Stacy, bring her to the warehouse I'll tell you about, and leave. Simple. Why not just hire professionals? Frank asked, suspicious again. Why do you need me? Because professionals can be traced back to me. Isabella's mask slipped for a moment, showing the desperate rage beneath. This has to look random. A robbery gone wrong. A vengeful stepfather who couldn't let go. Not an orchestrated hit from a rival family. She leaned closer. I need someone with a grudge against Stacy. Someone who has motive that has nothing to do with me. And you, Frank, are perfect. Frank counted the money in the envelope, crisp $100 bills that could save his miserable life. Isabella watched the moral calculation happen behind his eyes. Family versus survival. Conscience versus greed. Greed won. It always did with men like Frank. Okay. He pocketed the envelope. Tell me the plan. Isabella drove Frank to a 24-hour diner 2 blocks from the bar, where they sat in a corner booth, and she laid out every detail. The service gate code she'd hacked from a bribed gardener. The 3-minute window during the shift change when cameras reset. The route through the kitchen to the residential wing. The fact that Stacy had a prenatal appointment that afternoon and would be tired, vulnerable. Once you have her in your car, take her to this address. Isabella slid a piece of paper across the table. It's an abandoned shipyard on the south side. I'll be waiting. You hand her over. I give you the rest of the money, and you drive straight to the bus station. I've already bought you a ticket to Phoenix under a fake name. Frank studied the address, memorizing it. And you're sure Ramirez will be distracted? Because if he's not, he will be. Isabella's smile was satisfied. I made sure of it. The Colombian deal has been complicated, deliberately. There have been miscommunications about the product quality, the payment terms. Antonio has to be there in person to smooth things over. He can't delegate this without losing face. You sabotaged his deal just to get him away from Stacy? Frank looked almost impressed. I've been sabotaging everything for the past 3 days. Isabella's voice was cold, burning his alliances, spreading rumors among the other families, making sure he's fighting fires on every front. Her hand clenched around her coffee cup. He destroyed my future, so I'm destroying his, starting with that baby. The ugly truth hung between them. This wasn't just about Stacy anymore. It was about revenge. About making Antonio Ramirez hurt the way Isabella had been hurting since she watched him put that ring on another woman's finger. Frank finished his coffee. 3 days, 3 p.m., service gate. Exactly. Isabella stood, smoothing her designer dress. Don't disappoint me, Frank, or that broken wrist will be the least of your problems. She left him there with half his blood money and instructions for destroying his own stepdaughter. As she drove back to her penthouse apartment, Isabella caught her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her father would be horrified if he knew what she was planning. The commission would condemn her. Even her own conscience whispered that this crossed lines that shouldn't be crossed, but she silenced that voice with the memory of Antonio's hand on Stacy's stomach. The way he looked at that pregnant waitress like she hung the moon, the emerald ring that should have been Isabella's, glowing on unworthy fingers. Some women were born queens, others had to take the throne by force, and if Stacy wouldn't give up her crown willingly, Isabella would rip it from her bleeding hands. The prenatal appointment ran long. Dr. Martinez wanted to do extra ultrasounds, check Stacy's blood pressure twice, lecture her about stress levels and proper nutrition. By the time they finished, it was nearly 3 p.m., and Stacy was exhausted. The baby, now visible as a tiny flutter on the screen, heart beating strong, had made everything feel more real, more terrifying, more precious. Bruno walked her to the SUV in the medical building's underground garage, his usual 2 shadows flanking them. Mama Elena is making your favorite for dinner, he said, his gruff voice almost gentle. She's been cooking since dawn. Stacy smiled despite her fatigue. In the past week, Mama Elena had become the mother she never had, fussing over her, teaching her Italian phrases, telling stories about Antonio as a boy. Tell her I can't wait, and that I need the recipe for those cookies she made yesterday. Bruno's phone rang as they reached the SUV. He glanced at the screen and frowned. It's the boss. Give me a second. He stepped away, phone to his ear, while his men opened the car door for Stacy. She was halfway into the back seat when her own phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. Hello? Mrs. Ramirez? A woman's voice. Professional and urgent. This is Dr. Chen from Metro General Hospital. Your husband was brought in 15 minutes ago. There's been an incident at the docks. Stacy's blood turned to ice. What? Is Antonio okay? He's conscious but requesting you specifically. He's very insistent. Can you come immediately? He's in emergency room 3. Ah yes, of course. Stacy's hands shook. Metro General was only 10 minutes from there. I'm on my way. She ended the call and stumbled out of the SUV. Bruno, we need to go to Metro General. Now. Antonio's been hurt. Bruno spun around, his face going hard. What? When? Just now. A doctor called. He's in the emergency room, and he's asking for me. Tears blurred her vision. Please, we have to go. Bruno was already dialing, barking orders into his phone. But behind him, near the garage entrance, Stacy saw a familiar figure. Frank. Her stepfather stepped out from behind a concrete pillar, and something about his presence there now made her stomach drop. Bruno, she started to say. Too late. Frank lunged forward, and there was a cloth in his hand. He clamped it over her nose and mouth before she could scream, and the world tilted sideways. Chemical sweetness flooded her senses. Chloroform. Her training from a self-defense class she'd taken years ago screamed at her to hold her breath. To fight, but her body wasn't cooperating. Bruno roared, reaching for his gun. But 2 men emerged from the shadows, professionals in tactical gear. Gunshots cracked through the garage. Bruno went down. His men went down. Red bloomed across concrete. Stacy tried to fight, clawing at Frank's arm, but the chemical was pulling her under. The last thing she saw before darkness swallowed her was Frank's face, her stepfather who'd raised her, who was now selling her to monsters for 20,000 pieces of silver. Then nothing. Consciousness returned in fragments, cold, the smell of salt water and rust, pain in her wrists where something cut into skin. Stacy's eyes fluttered open to find herself in a nightmare. The abandoned shipyard stretched around her, rusted metal containers, broken equipment, and the skeletal remains of boats long forgotten. She was tied to a chair in the center of an empty warehouse, ropes biting into her wrists and ankles. Every muscle in her body ached, and nausea rolled through her stomach. The baby. Terror spiked through her fog. Please let the baby be okay. She's awake. Frank's voice. He was standing near the entrance with a duffel bag in his good hand, looking nervous and guilty in equal measure. I did what you asked. Now give me the rest of the money so I can get out of here. Soon. Isabella Moretti stepped out of the shadows like a designer-dressed demon. She'd traded her usual couture for dark jeans and a leather jacket, but she still wore her diamonds, still carried herself like royalty even in this hellhole. I need to handle something first. She approached Stacy with measured steps, and the smile on her face was pure malice. Hello, Donna Ramirez. So nice of you to join us. Stacy tried to speak, but her mouth was dry, her tongue thick from the drugs. Why? Isabella laughed, the sound sharp as breaking glass. Because you took everything from me, my future, my position, the man who was supposed to be mine. She crouched down until they were eye level. But mostly, because I can't stand the thought of you bringing his heir into this world. That baby gives you power over him, makes you untouchable, makes you matter. Please, Stacy's voice cracked. Please, I'll leave. I'll disappear. Just don't hurt. The baby? Isabella's hand shot out, gripping Stacy's chin hard enough to bruise. Oh, sweetheart. The baby is exactly why you're here. She released Stacy and straightened, pulling something from her jacket. A knife. Long, curved, gleaming. Frank made a strangled sound. You said rough handling. Some stress. You didn't say anything about... Shut up, Frank. Isabella didn't even look at him. Take your money and go. What happens next doesn't concern you. This is murder. I didn't sign up for murder. You signed up the moment you took my money. Isabella's voice was ice. Now leave, or join her. Frank hesitated, war happening behind his cowardly eyes. Then he grabbed the duffel bag and ran. Just ran, leaving Stacy tied to a chair with a knife-wielding psychopath. The sound of his car starting and tearing away echoed through the empty shipyard. Isabella turned back to Stacy, twirling the knife. Now, where were we? Isabella, please. Stacy was trying to think through the terror, trying to remember anything useful. The tracker. Antonio mentioned putting a tracker in her ring. The emerald she was still wearing. This won't bring him back to you. Killing me? Killing the baby, it won't make him love you. I don't need his love anymore. Isabella pressed the knife to Stacy's stomach, right where the baby grew. I just need you gone, and once you and that mistake are dead, he'll have nothing. No heir, no future. He'll be exactly as broken as he made me. The knife pressed harder, Stacy felt the sharp edge through her clothes, a pinprick of pain that promised worse. She closed her eyes, tears streaming, and prayed to a god she wasn't sure existed anymore. "I'm sorry," she whispered, to the baby, to Antonio, to herself. The warehouse door exploded inward with the force of a battering ram. Isabella spun around, and Stacy saw them dark shapes pouring through the entrance like avenging angels. Antonio's men, 20 of them, maybe more, weapons drawn and trained on Isabella, and at the center, moving with deadly purpose, was Antonio himself. He was dressed for war, tactical vest over his suit, gun in hand, his face a mask of controlled fury. His dark eyes swept the warehouse, found Stacy tied to the chair with a knife at her stomach, and something inhuman flashed across his features. "Let her go. Isabella." His voice was death itself. "Now." Isabella yanked Stacy backward, the chair tilting dangerously. The knife pressed harder, drawing blood. "One more step and I gut her like a fish. Your precious heir dies screaming. You're already dead." Antonio didn't lower his gun. "You just don't know it yet." "Am I?" Isabella's laugh was unhinged. "Your men shoot me, and my hand slips. The knife goes in. You get your Donna back in pieces." She pulled Stacy closer, the blade now cutting through fabric to skin. "Drop your weapons, all of you, or watch her bleed." For a moment, nobody moved. The standoff froze like a photograph. 20 guns trained on Isabella, Isabella's knife drawing a thin line of blood across Stacy's stomach. Antonio's face carved from stone. Then he did something Stacy didn't expect. He lowered his gun. "Everyone stand down." Boss Bruno, bleeding from a shoulder wound but alive, protested. "We can take the shot." "Stand down." Antonio set his gun on the ground and raised his hands. "Isabella, you want revenge? Take it, but let Stacy go first." "So you can kill me?" Isabella shook her head. "I'm not stupid." "No. So I can make you a deal." Antonio took one slow step forward, hands still raised. "Your father doesn't know about this, does he? You went rogue. This is all you." Isabella's grip on the knife wavered slightly. "So what?" "So I can make this go away. Tell the commission it was Frank crazy stepfather with a grudge. Your father doesn't lose face. Your family doesn't go to war. You get to walk away from this alive." Another step closer. "All you have to do is let her go. And trust you?" Isabella's voice cracked. "You'll hunt me down the moment she's safe." "Probably." Antonio's smile was cold. "But you'll have a head start. More than you deserve. More than you'll get if that knife goes any deeper and my men open fire." The blade trembled at Stacy's stomach. Isabella's breathing was ragged, panicked. She was realizing what Stacy already knew. There was no winning here, no escape. She was a dead woman either way. "I loved you," Isabella whispered. "Since we were teenagers. I waited for you." "I know." And for a moment, Antonio's voice softened. "But love isn't something you wait for, Isabella. It's something that chooses you. And I chose her." The knife pulled back, just an inch, just enough. Antonio moved like lightning. He crossed the distance in 3 strides, grabbed Stacy's chair, and yanked her backward just as Isabella's knife slashed air where her stomach had been. His body covered hers, shielding her completely, as Isabella screamed and lunged. Gunfire erupted. Not from Antonio's men. From the shadows. Marco Moretti stepped out from behind a container, his own gun smoking, and Isabella crumpled to the ground, shot by her own father. "Enough," Marco said heavily. "This ends now." But it didn't end. Because Isabella wasn't dead. She was wounded, screaming, raising her knife for one last desperate strike at Stacy. Antonio's body jerked. The blade meant for Stacy sank into his shoulder instead. He grunted, grabbed Isabella's wrist, and twisted until bones cracked and the knife fell. His men surged forward, pulling Isabella away, restraining her as she screamed and sobbed. Antonio's hands were already on the ropes, binding Stacy, his blood dripping onto her skin as he worked to free her. "I've got you," he murmured, his voice tight with pain. "I've got you, mi amor. You're safe now." Consciousness came slowly, wrapped in softness and the smell of antiseptic. Stacy's eyes fluttered open to find herself in a hospital room that looked nothing like any hospital she'd ever seen. Private, luxurious, the kind of place where billionaires recovered in peace, with cream-colored walls, original artwork, and a window overlooking a private garden rather than a parking lot. Medical equipment beeped steadily beside her bed, monitoring her heart rate, blood pressure, oxygen levels. An IV dripped clear fluid into her arm. But what made her breath catch was the man slumped in the chair beside her bed. his hand wrapped around hers even in sleep. Antonio. His shirt was gone, replaced by bandages wrapped around his shoulder where Isabella's knife had found flesh. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and stubble covered his jaw. He looked exhausted, vulnerable, human in a way she'd never seen him. Antonio. Her voice came out as a croak. His eyes snapped open immediately, and the relief that flooded his face was so raw it made her chest ache. Stacy. Thank God. He was on his feet in an instant, leaning over her, his good hand cupping her face. How do you feel? Any pain? Dizziness? The baby. Terror spiked through her, and her free hand flew to her stomach. Is the baby safe? Antonio's thumb stroked her cheek, his voice gentle despite the intensity in his eyes. The baby is fine. Strong heartbeat. Dr. Martinez did a full ultrasound. No damage. His voice broke slightly. You protected our child even when you thought you were going to die. Tears streamed down Stacy's face. Relief, gratitude, the delayed shock of everything that had happened. How long have I been asleep? 36 hours. You had a concussion from the chloroform, dehydration, shock. The doctors wanted to keep you sedated until your body could heal. His hand slid down to rest over hers on her stomach. But you're both going to be okay. I promise you that. Stacy looked at his bandaged shoulder. You took a knife for me. I'd take 1,000 knives for you. He said it like it was the simplest truth in the world. I'd burn down the world to keep you safe. What happened? After, she couldn't finish. The memory of Isabella's face, twisted with hatred. The knife at her stomach, the gunfire. Antonio's expression darkened. Marco Moretti shot his own daughter to stop her. She survived, barely. She's in a psychiatric facility now, under heavy sedation and guard. Marco has formally dissolved the Moretti family's operations and retired. The commission accepted his decision. He paused. Isabella will spend the rest of her life in that facility. She'll never hurt you again. And Frank? Stacy's voice was barely a whisper. Antonio's silence was answer enough. The cold emptiness in his eyes told her everything she needed to know about her stepfather's fate. Frank Peters, who'd sold her for $20,000, who'd helped a madwoman try to murder his own stepdaughter Frank, was gone. Permanently. Good, Stacy said quietly. She should have felt guilt, maybe. Some remnant of familial obligation, but all she felt was relief that he could never hurt her again. And Bruno? I saw him go down in the garage. Alive. Pissed off that he let them get to you, but alive. He's been standing guard outside your door since we brought you here, refusing to leave until you woke up. Antonio's smile was slight. My mother has been here too. I finally convinced her to go home and sleep 2 hours ago. She must hate me. Fresh tears sprang to Stacy's eyes. I brought all this danger to your family. Isabella, the war. Bruno getting shot. Stop. Antonio's voice was firm. He sat carefully on the edge of her bed, mindful of the IV. My mother doesn't hate you. None of them do. You're family now, Stacy. My family protects its own. What happened wasn't your fault, it was Isabella's choice. Frank's choice. Evil people making evil decisions. But if you hadn't existed, I'd still be an empty shell of a man going through the motions of building an empire with no one to share it with. His hand cupped her face again, forcing her to meet his eyes. You gave me a reason to want tomorrow. You gave my mother hope. You gave my family a future. Whatever price we paid to keep you safe was worth every drop of blood. Stacy's throat was too tight to speak. She'd spent her entire life being told she was worthless, a burden, something to be used and discarded. And here was this dangerous, powerful man telling her she was worth bleeding for, worth everything. I love you, she whispered. The words surprised even her, but once they were out, she knew they were true. Somewhere between the bathroom confrontation and being crowned his Donna, between the mansion and the knife at her stomach, she'd fallen in love with the monster who became her protector. Antonio went very still. His dark eyes searched hers like he was looking for doubt. Say it again. I love you, Antonio Ramirez. Stronger this time, more certain. I don't know when it happened. Maybe when you broke Frank's wrist. Maybe when you held me after Isabella humiliated me. Maybe when you put this ring on my finger. She lifted her hand, the emerald catching the light. But I love you, and I'm terrified of what that means. It means you're mine. He leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. And I'm yours, completely, irrevocably. His lips brushed hers with devastating gentleness. Ti amo, mia regina. I love you. I've loved you since you tried to sneak out of my penthouse at dawn 3 weeks ago, since you stood up to Isabella covered in wine, since you chose to fight instead of giving up. He kissed her properly then, slow and deep, and Stacy tasted the promise in it. Protection, devotion, a future she'd never dared to dream about. When they finally broke apart, Antonio rested his hand on her stomach. Get some rest. Heal. Because in a few months, we have a baby to meet. And I plan to marry you properly before then, cathedral, dress, the whole thing. My mother is already planning. Of course she is. Stacy laughed through her tears. I'm not sure I know how to be a bride, or a mother, or a queen. You'll learn. His smile was soft. And I'll be there for every step, every doubt, every fear, every triumph. He kissed her forehead. You're not alone anymore, Stacy. You never will be again. 5 months later, the nursery was filled with people, Mama Elena weeping joyfully, Bruno and the other men standing respectfully at the edges. Family members Stacy was still learning the names of, but at the center of it all was Antonio, cradling a tiny bundle wrapped in blue. His son, their son, Alessandro Ramirez, born at dawn with a healthy set of lungs and his father's dark eyes. Stacy watched from the rocking chair, exhausted but radiant in silk pajamas that cost more than her old apartment's monthly rent. The labor had been long but safe, attended by the best doctors money could buy. And now, hours later, she got to watch her husband they'd married 2 months ago in a ceremony that made her cry hold their baby like he was made of glass. He has your nose, Mama Elena said, leaning over to stroke the baby's cheek. And look, he's got Antonio's stubborn chin already. Poor kid, Stacy murmured, making everyone laugh. Antonio looked up, his expression so full of love it took her breath away. He's perfect. You're perfect. He crossed to her, carefully placing Alessandro in her arms. Our miracle. Stacy looked down at her son, this tiny human she and Antonio had created. 10 perfect fingers, 10 perfect toes. Lungs that worked, a heart that beat strong. Against all odds, against every threat and danger, he was here. Safe. Loved beyond measure. Hey, little one, she whispered. Welcome to the family. It's complicated and dangerous and absolutely insane. But you're going to be so loved. So protected. She kissed his forehead. Your daddy is going to spoil you rotten. Your grandmother is going to feed you constantly. And me? Her voice broke. I'm going to make sure you never feel invisible, never feel worthless. You're going to know every single day how much you matter. Antonio knelt beside the rocking chair, his hand on her shoulder, his other hand gentle on his son's head. To Alessandro, he said softly, the next dawn of the Ramirez family. May he inherit his mother's strength and his father's. Slightly better judgment. Laughter filled the nursery. Mama Elena started crying again. Bruno raised a glass of champagne. And Stacy sat there, holding her baby, surrounded by family she never thought she'd have, and realized something profound. She wasn't the invisible waitress anymore. Not the girl who didn't matter. She was Stacy Ramirez Donna, mother queen. She'd survived poverty, abuse, kidnapping, and assassination attempts. She'd fought for her place in this world and won. And as Antonio kissed her temple and their son grasped his finger with tiny, perfect hands, Stacy finally understood what it meant to be home. Not a place. Not a mansion or a compound or a gilded cage. Home was being loved, being protected, being seen. And she was finally, beautifully, impossibly home.